right. Well, good afternoon or good morning to you, depending on where you are coming in the world. But welcome to, on behalf of MICA, we welcome you all to the meat messaging webinar that we're happy to host along with our friends at Meat and Livestock Australia. I would just like to offer a few housekeeping items for everybody before we jump in. One, we are recording the session, and I believe we'll make it available for people who aren't able to make it today or later. Just to note that you are on mute as you came in to the room. We're going to hopefully keep you on mute for most of the presentation, and I will mute you if you happen to accidentally come off. But what we're going to do is we're open to any questions you might have. Just please put them in the chat. And then we can pose those questions to the speakers at the end of our meeting here. And then also we will have a little bit of time at the end for people to come off mute to ask a few other questions. So until then, appreciate you all staying on mute. And with that, I'm going to get out of the way and I'm going to turn it over to kind of the MC of today's event. So Mr. Doug Mcnichol with Meat and Livestock Australia. So Doug.
Thanks, Steve, and hello, everyone. Great to be with you. My name's Doug Mcnichol from Meat and Livestock Australia. I'm the Regional Manager for North America. Meat and Livestock Australia, if you don't know, are the research, development and marketing service provider for the Australian red meat industry. We also spend quite a bit of time working with our good friends at MICA, and a number of you good folk on the call working through a range of market access issues. And one of those is certainly technical issues like those that we're addressing today using the meat messaging service. And again, a reminder of the purpose of today's webinar is to provide the latest information on the meat messaging system for US importers and import establishments. You can see we've got a couple of speakers for you today. That's me to the top right-hand side, but you're going to be hearing from Des Bowler from Management for Technology, who are the company behind the meat messaging system, and also Leonard Lang, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know in my short time here to date, who's our US industry consultant working with a number of you good folk on technical market access issues. You're also going to be hearing from some current users of the meat messaging system, Tiffany Reed from Lineage Logistics, Frank D'Angelo from Mcnichol, and Nate Sorbello from Sorbello Refrigerated Services. And it's great that we can hear the voice of the user in webinars like this. And so my spiel is very short and sharp. I have the pleasure of just driving today's deck. So without further ado, I'm going to walk you through the agenda and then hand you off the first speakers. So Des and Len are going to be providing an overview of how meat messaging works, an overview of its benefits for users, the problems it solves for users, and key points such as those. We're then going to move into a panel discussion where Tiffany's going to lead off with some her lived experience using the meat messaging system. She'll then hand over to Frank, and then on to Heather is with us, but Nate's doing the speaking today. And then we're going to open to questions and answers. I encourage you to contribute your thoughts and questions through the chat function, which is if you scroll to the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat box. Encourage you to click it and drop your questions or thoughts in as the presenters are presenting. And then depending upon the level of questions, we'll also then provide the opportunity for verbal questions at the end. So we just ask you to hold those verbal questions to the end. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speakers, Des and Lenny. I think, Des, you're going to kick things off.
In fact, thank you very much, Doug. Thank you, Steve, for allowing us to do this. Len's going to do the first few slides, so we'll let Len, because they're looking at it from the perspective from the US. So Len, you can fire in.
Okay, thanks, Des, and thanks, Doug. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. So what is meat messaging? What it is it's a secure cloud industry portal where the Australian export establishments upload their consignment information, or of course, the information that for the shipment that's going to be exported, in this case to the United States. It is what they call the electronic meat transfer certificate, or as we know it in the US, it's the e-cert, or the certificate information that you normally see when you're doing an import inspection at an import establishment, but it's all included into the meat message system as well, in just a different format, but all the information is there. It's based on GS1 barcoding, and it gives an identification of the product and the true shipping mark. And there's other attributes or uses, the authenticity of the data, verification of the data, and traceability of the data. And I think Des will touch on some of that later in the presentation. Next slide. So an overview of the system. As we all know, MLA stopped doing in-person remarking. They've been doing it for quite a while. They announced it last year, and so in November of last year, they quit coming out doing the in-person, observing import establishments to do the remarking. It's all managed through meat messaging now. When you need to remark a shipping mark, or you have a shipping mark error, you have to do it through meat message system. And next slide. The system provides valuable information to the US import establishments, end users, and importers of records. So for instance, import establishments can access the data and correct shipping marks without someone from Australia or the foreign government to be there in place. They use the unique identifier, which is the barcode, and they match it up to the shipment in meat messaging, which, you know, that information such as certificate number, shipping mark is in the system. There's other data in the system that can be used, and then Des will get a little bit more into that as we go further into the presentation. But that data, such as chemical lean, there's COAs can be attached to a meat messaging. There's also the fact that you can use the barcodes for traceback, for traceability. So if you have an STEC sample, for instance, at an import establishment, and the barcode's read, that barcode can be used and the information used as traceback for any type of issue you may have. The only issue with meat messaging is the country and the establishments need to be approved in the system in order to access and use the data. Well, access and use the data. Next slide. One of the things that meat messaging helped and helps the exporters and the import establishments with is reducing the number of shipping mark errors and refused entries. So over the last 3 years, there's been a 50% reduction and refused entries due to the fact that import establishments use the system to go in and remark product, and there's none of the destruction or rejections that are re-exported back to Australia. Next slide. So who are the users of meat messaging? Of course, the Australian export establishments, the listed establishments in the system. And of course, they're using the system not only to load the information in for our use as an import establishment, end user, or an importer of record, but also for the eCert, the electronic certification, importing countries, inspection facilities. Of course, import establishments use the system for remarking boxes when missing shipping marks occur. And then end users can access the information and use it based on chemical lien, based on traceability, COA in the system. There's a number of things that can be used in the system to help an end user. And then the Australian regulators, of course, and the importing country regulators all have access to the system. And the system provides the information for shipping marks, traceability. There was also the pallet protocol, which Des will touch briefly on shortly, and any of the other information in the system for traceability and traceback. Next slide. So what Des and the meat messaging people are going to be doing is a public listing of the import establishments that are approved to use the system. And that public listing will let end users or importers of record know who has the system, access to the system, and who can use it for when correcting shipping marks occurs. And I think Des may be able to touch a little bit on this, but I think the users that are approved in Australia and also by USDA will also be added to a list someplace so that the end users, import establishments, or importer records will have that as well. So, and it's updated daily. I mean, it depends, but it depends how many people access and get access to the system, but it'll change daily for people looking for specific information. Okay, next slide. And Des, I think I'm turning it over to you here, but this is the Pallet Pilot barcode shipping mark pilot that we ran. And I think, Des, if you want to talk a little bit about it, I think this right now we're looking at going from a stencil shipping mark to a barcode as a shipping mark.
Okay, thank you, Len. And yes, as Len was just saying, this was the Pallet Pilot protocol we developed. We worked with the FSIS over a period of time to negotiate a protocol that let us export product from Australia into the US without having to apply shipping marks to individual cases. So we created a pallet where we'd machine wrap the pallet, slip sheet top and bottom, and put a placard on the pallet. And at time of inspection in the US, they would inspect the pallet and say, here are 42 cases all wrapped up. Everything is correct. There is no damage. Through the through the wrapping, we could see the individual case details. And the FSIS inspector looked at the placard, which you can see there, the yellow placard. And if the pallet was intact and correct, they would stamp the placard and it would then enter US commerce. So instead of individual little cases, 700 cases in a shipping container, we had 24 pallets. So there were 24 inspections. The saving in time was phenomenal. That was its value. Saving in time with the exporter, rather than putting shipping marks on and managing 700 units, they were managing 24 units. In terms of the inspection facility, moving 24 pallets on roller forks out of a shipping container was phenomenally quicker than individual cases. And for the time spent doing inspection, it was a fraction. So inspecting 24 units instead of 700 units. So huge industry saving. But it is a specific protocol that requires certain activities to occur in a certain sequence to be applicable. Doesn't fix all problems, but for high volume product like trim, it is an excellent option available to to the supply chain. Next slide, thanks. Okay, now Len listed off before the different organizations that use meat messaging. Let's look at the numbers. So there's 241 organizations registered. As we said, that will be exporters, that will be import inspection establishments, that will be end users, the different groups that uses. 122,000 messages for 12 months, 44.6 million cases have been uploaded in 12 months, so a little bit happening, about 1.9 billion pounds in the last 12 months. So it's a fair slab of the volume moving out of Australia. Up to between 60 and 80% of beef that leaves Australia is being uploaded into meat messaging. So there's a lot there. 42 export establishments consistently uploading messages. We do not have all of industry using it. We have all the major players in industry using it, but the next and bottom tier export establishments, we're slowly working on getting them all implemented into meat messaging. Next slide, Doug. Okay, now one of the things that we've been asked to do, and we just sort of threw this slide in so people could get an idea, different people get asked different questions about meat messaging. Now, this might be as simple as, what do I do when I see a missing or damaged shipping mark for an inspection establishment? And this flow chart is meant to be able to say, okay, what happens? Is it an Australian exporter? Is it on the Australian list? As Len said, there is now a published list for that. And it just goes down the options as to what to do. So this was the quick cheat sheet we've tried to put together to help everybody whenever that question comes up. So it applies equally to everybody who comes in contact with some issue about Australian exported meat product. Next slide, Doug. Okay, now as Len said, we start to describe the technical process of how this works. So we'll keep jumping between, it's a really simple system, which it is, but then also the technical aspects that how it works. So in essence, the export establishment, the processing plant in Australia that packs the cases and packs a shipping container, uploads the information out of their IT system into the meat messaging system. They load it into the X-Doc system, which is the e-cert part of it. So government certificate system that says there's 700 cartons in this shipping container. And they upload it into the meat messaging system, which says these are the individual 700 barcodes that comprise that shipment. And this is the important part. The two systems work together. X-Doc goes off to PHIS, health certificate number. Here is the authorization for the shipment to move, and meat messaging, which says these are all the individual cases that are in that health certificate. So the two systems work together, and you'll see them when you see a case, and you'll see the barcode and a GS1 barcode, and we know that it's uploaded into meat messaging. So that's the important part to remember. Government to government system, X-Doc, e-cert, that layer. Meat messaging is another layer. The two systems work together. Next slide, Doug. Okay, so on a day-to-day use, what's it look like? So here we are scanning, in this case, we were doing the pallet protocol, scanning a pallet, and it would bring up all the manifest data. Or scanning a carton, so you can do it on the app, you can do it on a computer, you can do it on a tablet. You scan it, and up comes, so scan any case in a whole shipment, and up will come the message if it's been uploaded to meat messaging. Enter a health certificate number, and it'll bring up all the cases. So if there is a missing shipping mark, the protocol outlines the steps. Go and find the shipment, the all carton serial number report by scanning a carton or using the health certificate number. Once you've got that report, there's a process of going and highlighting on it which cases are missing the shipping marks. These cases are. You can see they're in the report, but they're missing the mark. That's what the protocol outlines for correcting missing and damaged shipping marks. Exceptionally simple. So that's a real simple how to use. There's help instructions, quick sheets, a whole pile of support information on how import inspection establishments can very easily and highly manually, if it's easier, manage missing or damaged shipping marks. Next slide, thanks. So, as Len said, some additional usage. Now, what we do know is that within industry, there are a range of technology skill sets. So we have some import inspection facilities, very manual based. We've always done manual. This is the process. We use a bit of paper. You can use meat messaging with that. Literally as simple as going to a website, punching in the health certificate number, printing out the all barcodes report and being able to use it that way. And as Len said, we can do traceability, CL values per case, certificate of analysis, production dates, product descriptions, all of that information. However, we can also do additional things with it. Because all the information is in the cloud, it's all been uploaded, it's all sitting there ready to run. You can use it, because this is what it really is, you can use it as an advanced shipping notice, or what you'd refer to as an ASN. This is a very common thing with supermarkets. They often say, we want advanced shipping notices. So meat messaging is just an advanced shipping notice. With that, it means that the exporter, if they know where it's going, can notify the buyer, importer in advance of a message. Get sent an email. In the email is a link. In the link is the download the complete all barcodes report, download the data, suck it in electronically through APIs. Once the importer has that information, when they have selected an inspection establishment for the inspection to take place, they can forward that. They can do a notification to the import inspection establishment, and meat messaging will send an email to the inspection establishment, keep a record that it's been sent, and the import inspection establishment clicks the link, can get the whole barcode report, can have it printed even before the shipping container is opened. A whole pile of power in that concept of advanced shipping notice. Now, once the import inspection facility has finished the inspection and the product has been released, they can get back into meat messaging and do a notify of the buyer that the release has taken place. This is all this concept of advanced shipping notice. In advance of it shipping, I'm sending you a notice. The buyer then may be able to notify the end user, done. It's released, it's ready to go. So these are all the power that is sitting there because all the information is sitting in the cloud. But it all depends. Some import inspection establishments, give me the piece of paper, let me do the check, done. Other supply chains want all the advanced shipping notice. Now, we're not saying you have to do that. It's available to you. So think about how you can use it to better suit servicing customers. Next slide, thanks. So what's it look like along the supply chain? Just to get an idea how it works. So when we look at the whole meat supply chain, and this is one of MLA's flow charts, so thank you very much to Doug. So in our Australian context, we have our livestock system where we have our traceability and ear tags and all the rest of the things on there. We have our slaughter processing system where we have government supervision and linkage back to the individual animals. We have our boning process where we then put a GS1 barcode onto the carton. And that's when we start to have our data being uploaded to meat messaging. So when the product leaves, the data is uploaded. So every single case that leaves an export establishment, if they're fully integrated and using the system fully, every single case that leaves is uploaded. They're uploaded either as what we call a domestic message, meaning it's a domesticated product only going to the country Australia. It's moving through an EMTC where we move it to other export establishments like third-party cold stores. And then we pack containers directly and then upload export messages. The important part there is every case that leaves an establishment is in meat messaging and tracked. Next slide, thanks. So then when it arrives in the US, when we talk about our container showing up in import inspection, then you're using meat messaging to say, tell me about that container. Tell me about all the cases in it. Tell me all the barcodes. Tell me the product descriptions, the CLs, the certificate of analysis, all the production dates, all the information we need is sitting there in the advanced shipping notice that is meat messaging. And then we have our end users and we have everybody else further along the supply chain that uses it. Next slide, thanks, Doug. So again, let's talk about how it works so we can see this in our very simple context. So we think of meat messaging as a giant filing cabinet in the cloud. So think of it like that. So what we have is we have our barcodes and consignment details and health certificate numbers, seal numbers, shipping container numbers, all that information, all bundled together in a message and stuck up in the cloud, sitting there waiting for the person with the key, with the right information to be able to access it. Something that meat messaging does not contain, it does not contain commercially sensitive information. There's no money, there's no pricing, there's nothing that is commercially sensitive. If you have the right to have the case in front of you, if you have the right to have the health certificate, so the keys to the information, you have the right to the information. Because that's what you need to clear product. That's what you need for product along the supply chain. You need the information about that case, about that shipment. So we do not put money, no commercially sensitive information, just the logistics and consignment information. As I said before, it doesn't replace the government X-Doc health certificate. Health certificate is health certificate. Thumbs up, we need that. But a health certificate doesn't have all the case barcodes. That's what meat messaging does, so they work together. In the perfect world, this is all being done in IT systems. In terms of the export establishments in Australia, this must be part of their IT system. This is what we call full electronic inventory visibility. This has to be driven by scanning barcodes, inventory systems, pushing it up. Import inspection establishments, buyers and end users, that's not the case. You can log into the website and simply punch in a health certificate and get that information. Or if you are fully electronic and you want to see what the CL value is of every case of trim that you've got coming in, connect in and away you go. So there's a very important difference here. You can be fully computer integrated, numbers moving around the internet, or you can print out the report and have it there and say to the inspector, these cases here, missing shipping marks, here they are on the report. They are what they say they are. So quite a range of usage. Certificate data, that certificate data being available long before shipments show up, very powerful. So remember, advanced shipping notice, meat messaging, getting the information before the shipment shows up. Doug, next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about a couple of things that it solves that we've seen. So as we've said, half the number of rejection instances that happen. Now, Len highlighted some of it when we were looking at that little chart. What happened through the implementation of meat messaging? The export establishments had to have a good hard look at themselves when implementing. And so many of the work practices that may have been sitting there for 20 years were suddenly reviewed and said that perhaps isn't the best way of doing it. So as well as being able to resolve missing and damaged shipping marks far more efficiently than we have in the past, we're also able to have halved the number of occurrences of rejections by meat messaging, forcing people to have a look at their own in-house systems and fix poor work practice that has been in place. Has that fixed everybody's poor work practice? Not even likely. Are we benchmarking and reporting rejection instances that happens for every establishment in Australia? Yes, we do. So in the last 12 months, there's been about 63 establishments that have had rejections. Some have had a lot of rejections, some have had only one rejection. But we log and report those and benchmark them all to all the exporters in Australia. And we joke about being number one on that list is the worst place you could possibly be. And some of our export establishments and one of our big companies, QA managers, turned around to one of his plants and he said, "You won the competition. For the competition, you are not to win." So benchmarking, recording, all of this is helping drive the industry quality, helping drive the industry to be in a better place in not having the occurrence of these errors. But we're a long way from being perfect yet. Next slide, thanks. Now, what happens if, when you're using meat messaging as an import inspection establishment, you find that there's a case that isn't in meat messaging? You find you punch a health certificate in and there's nothing coming up. There's a form we have to be able to record that information, and it outlines a few little steps. Send that form back to us, and then it goes to the exporting establishment responsible with a please explain why. Because under their approved arrangements, if they're using meat messaging, they have an obligation to upload all their messages. So if they've had a break in their IT system or someone went on holidays and forgot to push the go button, we need to know so we can go back to them and point out under their regulatory frameworks, under their approved arrangements, that they are not meeting their obligations. So we need to know when it's not working, and then we need to be able to go back and take action against those exporters who said that they're doing it, put it in their approved arrangements, got endorsed by the government, got listed on FSIS as following this system, and we ask them what happened. And then they go, "Oh, yeah, John went on holidays last week, and he's the guy who pushes the button for the messages to get uploaded." And suddenly we find there's a hole in their system and they have to fix it. Your feedback will mean a better system. So let us know when we find a problem. Next slide, thanks. JBS went through some processes on this, and we'll talk about some of the value JBS saw out of this. So they have a number of plants and export a fair amount of product to the US. These are the words coming from Stuart, who's responsible at the QA system level for addressing all of these issues associated with shipping marks and moving product. He had a big long list, and he just went, the product wastage reduction was top of his list. Being able to have a carton barcode and say, where did you come from? Where did you go through? What shipment were you on? Instantly being able to get that information. Because we can do it as simply as with an app on a website, there's a very simple to use. So he was very happy with that. And because it's being generated and uploaded electronically, people weren't being involved. And the more we could pull the people out, the better. So he had a lot of benefits. Next slide, thanks. Now, Stuart came back and did a bit of analysis. And he looked at 13 days, picked a good number, 13 days time window. He looked at how many issues could be resolved. And they came up with that like $30,000 to $50,000 direct saving in 13 days of product that would have been destroyed on rejection, where they were able to resolve the issue with meat messaging. Now, when you look at those numbers, 10 cases, 5 cases, 10 cases, 2 cases, 2 cases historically wouldn't bother ever to be remarked. They just would have been binned. Now, meat messaging is giving the option to go print the report, highlight those 2 cases, show the inspector where these cases belong to that shipment to provide the evidence, and there they are now authorized to be remarked. Literally as simple as that. So there's a huge benefit that they saw straight away. And as I said, he just looked at 116, went through, checked what the status was, what had happened, and 13-day window, $30,000 to $50,000 savings. So massive saving. Over the industry, over the last few years, it's a couple of $100 million out of the Australian export to the US that have been saved using meat messaging. So a fair amount of value. Next slide, thanks. This is what it looks like when you generate an all carton serial number report. Again, this was my friend at JBS saying this is how we use it. Literally, That's as simple as you see. You see a list of barcodes, you'll see the port mark they're supposed to, and above that would have been the health certificate number and all the rest of the shipping container and dates and all the rest of the information. But they're a list of barcodes. Now, what's special about those barcodes and why FSIS said this is good, when you use the GS1 system and follow that standard, that barcode is globally unique. It is used once, never used again. So when I look up that number, it is one case. So anywhere in the world, I can scan that barcode and it only ever occurs once. And that's because the GS1 standard says it shows me the country, shows me the company, shows me the production date, shows me the weight, shows me the serial number. Unique. That is the power of the system. This case will never be repeated ever, ever, ever. Next slide, thanks. One of the experience JBS went through, and each of the companies that have implemented meat messaging at an exporter, and many of you as the import inspection facilities, have seen the same issue. We have to communicate that we're doing this. Organizations need to communicate internally. They have to train their staff. They have to know their staff's how it's working. What you don't want is the example I gave where someone went on holidays and therefore the system stops. And Tiffany has given me a few examples of that over the time where she goes, where is this barcode? And somebody's gone on holidays and is no longer pushing the go button. It must be internally communicated. Staff must be trained. You have to tell customers, all our product is now uploaded into Meat messaging. If there's an issue, you can find it. If you don't tell customers that, why are they going to start? Or worse, you've started to head down the path of Meat messaging as an exporter, but you haven't got it there yet. Yet importers are going, why can't I find your product? You must communicate what's happening. Training, 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 and more training. IT, QA, everybody is being trained so that they know this is happening. Otherwise, it doesn't work. The other thing that Stu found was critical, at each site, someone had ownership of the system. So if there was an issue, there was a go-to person on every site. Where it's just sitting under IT or where it's just sitting under quality and there's no owner, we find that something goes wrong on a day, something breaks, and nobody knows until all of a sudden there's an issue in the US and we go, where's all this information? It has to have ownership within the organization. So these were the key messages that JBS found out of their implementation. You must communicate, internal and customers, must train all the way across the organization, must have ownership. Next slide, thanks.
It's got 60-second warning, Des. We just got to keep moving for the next speakers. So just give me that
Absolutely,
slide.
hit the go. This is the benefits on a global context. This slide highlights the cross-border standards toolkit, World Trade Organization. Meat messaging harmonizes with all of those systems. This was put in to show that it is part of a global set of standards, not just us making it up. It fits with the World Trade Organization objectives for advanced shipping notice and GS1 barcoding and all the rest of it. Next slide, Doug. One of the things we focus on this is how we implement this to fix real-time problems. So if we can fix issues as they happen, when they happen, we get the value. And we've got example and example where we've resolved issues. Next slide, Doug. We're now moving to Frank. Did I keep my 50 seconds exactly on time?
Well done, Des. And I'm sure that we're going to hear some good lived examples from our next speakers to validate those benefits. So I might stop screen share now, given that we've got Frank with us. I'm going to spotlight Frank for each of you. Over to you, Frank.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. So my name's Frank D'Angelo. I've been in imports with Mcnichol for about 5 years now. and I'm the primary user for meat messaging here. And as I mentioned before to some of us on the call here, it really functions well for us. The only challenge I've ever had is when barcodes, as Des alluded to, are not uploaded into the meat messaging portal, let's call it. But once I'm able to access the barcodes and present that in a nice, neat package to the inspector, I'm doing same day rectification on cases. So it really benefits, for example, our shipping dock, where I don't have to have multiple touches on pallets or cases. You know, I can present to the inspector today. He might refuse 4 or 5 cases for missing mark. I print out the barcodes, print out the labels, and maybe a half hour later, I could have potentially those cases rectified and put away with the rest of the load. Whereas prior, you know, we were, you know, potentially destroying cases or going through a longer process. So it's really helped in that regard. And I can't say I've encountered any other issue other than the barcodes are not there. Des, once or twice, I think I noticed maybe there was 3 or 4 cases not on the barcode list. I don't know how that would actually happen. I'm sure you would probably have a few theories, but other than that, it really works great for us. A lot of savings in, you know, manpower. You know, we used to do clean downs, obviously, for when we're doing the destruction, you're cleaning down the room, using a lot of sanitation supplies and things like that. So there's a cost savings there as well. You know, some of the savings you don't really think about until you start to really dig deep. And it's more than just remarking the case and putting it back with the load. It's, you know, saving on payroll and things like that. So it's been great for us. So I appreciate everyone giving me a chance to kind of speak on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. I think we're next going to be hearing from Tiffany.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me. I want to start off by how the system has helped us here. It's given us flexibility within the 45-day limit to remark based upon our operations and dock space. It eliminates product waste and having to destroy cases, and it saves us a great deal of time in regard to having to wait for approvals from FSIS and wait for an embassy representative to come on site. The only issues that we've been seeing here is barcodes not being uploaded into the system. And when there are multiple certificates and multiple shipping marks, it's hard to decipher which case is coming from which shirt and which case is coming from which mark. So that's another issue that we're seeing here. As far as the impacts to the workflow, it has increased in labor, both physical and clerical. We've seen about a 30% increase of refused entry cases for no shipping marks since we have come on board with the meat messaging system. And I would say that some lessons that we've learned here and some things we'd like to see going forward. Not every inspector is familiar with the system. So I think it would benefit if there would be something put in place on the FSIS website. And also, I think I might have heard Des or Len touch base on this earlier, but shipping marks that are put on a label and stuck to the box are not really that durable. Most cases that we see with no shipping marks are because that sticker has fallen off. So maybe in hopes for the future, we see some, you know, Des, you were saying about the pallet pilot, or maybe even an ink stamp to go on the boxes. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have. Thanks for letting me be a speaker and share my experience.
That's great, Tiffany. Thanks for those points. And I'm sure we might loop back to some of those in the Q&A, just fleshing out some of the solution options. But next, we're going to hear from Nate.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time. Kind of reiterate on the points that have already been made. It's definitely a very helpful tool. It has saved us plenty and tons of time along the way. It's very user-friendly of an interface, right? You go in, you can either enter that we've utilized the actual barcode of a case that doesn't have a shipping mark, or we've also utilized the health cert number in order to identify these barcodes and pull and extract for our inspector. As it's already been stated, right, some of the info isn't always there, right? So we're constantly reaching out to our customers to have them update so we can pull for our inspectors. That's been spoken about a couple of times. So ultimately, the inspectors are being trained on this, and it's kind of interesting. We luckily have a relatively new inspector right now. She's only been in the field for about 2 months, and she is new as of last week. She came here ready to go and ready to utilize this tool. And one of the few things I must say that I wanted to see from this program in the future would be to eliminate the use of or need of replacements with MICA messaging, right? Mismarked overages and shortages. I see a real opportunity there to use the barcodes to avoid a replacement altogether and just get it rectified on the original health cert lot. That also goes for shipping mark, invalid shipping marks or wrong shipping marks. I see a lot of potential here, and the inspector wants to utilize it for this as well. And the only thing preventing us from using it is USDA. So if we can get USDA to buy into the other benefits of this, then I see this as an outstanding tool, greater than it already has been. Yeah, that's all I have for you.
Right, thanks, Nate. I'm going to throw now to Steve just to kind of curate some of the questions that have perhaps popped up in the chat box. And as you do that, Steve, I'm also going to spotlight each of the speakers such that we can direct traffic accordingly. So over to you, mate.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Doug. I think actually Nate's last point there, Des, is one of the questions that came up. So maybe that's the one you might want to jump on first. Has there been any conversation with FSIS or government representatives to move beyond just when the shipping mark is missing versus using the system to fix broken shipping marks or fix health certificate issues?
Excellent question, and one that has been sitting around for a couple of years. There is work. Len has been working on it. I've been working from the department at this level. It's really just everybody sitting down in terms of the Australian government and the FSIS and nothing out that protocol to make sure that those elements are correctly addressed. The concerns of FSIS and saying, well, are they the wrong cases is absolutely critical. We've got to make sure that they are the right cases. That's the concern they raise. But MICA messaging has the ability to say those barcodes are that shipment. See, electronically, they were all linked. They were what were picked to go in that container. The fact that someone's not paying attention when they label, and I had an example at an exporter doing goat, and they had 3 shipments on the dock they were labeling. And the guy who's got the label gun is not considered to be the most highly skilled person on the floor. He finished the load he was doing and then went to the next pallet of the next load. That becomes a bad day in the US. So explaining to FSIS how these errors happen and allowing them to use MICA messaging to correct them is active work we're doing at the moment. Hopefully we can get it over the line. Your thoughts, Len?
No, and you're right, Des. We have kind of started some discussions with USDA on it, and I think we'll pull in MLA and the embassy as we move forward, try to get some changes there so we can do any issue with shipping marks through MICA messaging.
Very good. 1 or 2 of these questions came in early on in the presentation, so it might have the questioner might have gotten their answer already. But the question came when you were talking about the pallets only having the placard and no individual shipping marks. So what happens if the pallet breaks up and you find a rogue box? How do you identify that box?
Exceptionally easily. put the barcode into meat messaging and it says this voyage, this vessel, this health certificate, this shipping mark for the pallet, this pallet ID, all that information is sitting there. But remember, the key is the case barcode is a key to all the information. As soon as you go, oh, so I use that to find everything related to it. Now, the moment you do that, any case anywhere in commerce can immediately be looked at and said, it was made on this by this plant. It was moved from this plant to this export establishment cold store. They packed it in this container on this date. It's with this health certificate. All that information is available online using the barcode as a key. So no barcode is ever lost. No barcode is ever without its information. You just have to put it in to find it.
Yeah. And then just to add to that, the barcode then is linked to the certificate and certificate number, shipping mark. And of course, those are in the PHIS. So if I wanted to cross-reference and see if that load was inspected, I could pull that information up through meat messaging and trace it all the way back to the document in PHIS that says it was inspected, and where and all that other information will be in there.
Very good. I'm going to combine two questions here together. So one, is this only applying to Australia at this time, or are any other countries considering meat messaging? And then two, for Australia specifically, does this mean that there's no manual way for remarking anymore? Is meat messaging the only option?
Question part two first. Yes, that's what we highlighted in those letters. Both the embassy, Austrade and such like, and MLA have said no, and that happened last year. So if you have an issue with a missing or damaged shipping mark and it isn't in meat messaging, there's no resolution able to be applied. Right. Part one of your question, meat messaging is a standard. It uses, as I said, advanced shipping notice. So technologically, any country could apply the same rules. So it's all about understanding that we're talking about GS1 barcodes, and we only say GS1 because it's the global standard. All the retailers, everybody uses to say this barcode follows these rules. So standards-based barcode, standards-based advanced shipping notice, available to import inspection facilities. Put the data in the cloud and it's there following a standard. So technically, any country could do this if they wish to go down the line. Are there countries raising those questions? Yes. Is that something you may see happen over time? Yes.
Very good. And just two more items here, just to kind of close this out from what's in the chat box. Will we be able to make the PowerPoint presentation available to the group? I think that's probably not a problem. We can certainly distribute that, and we'll get that set up. Finally, more of a statement than a question is, based on this, one would hope that USDA would get the point and just use the GS1 system rather than shipping marks, which I think is more aspirational, but certainly something many people would agree with.
We started on this journey 20 plus years, about 1999, to get the directive to show a GS1 barcode in the directive for missing and damaged shipping marks was a 15-year journey. So the answer to that question is yes, that's where we want to get to. Don't rush.
It's funny because you say that, because when, I guess it's got to be 12, 15 years, USDA did look at barcodes for a short time frame, used on imports and exports. So there probably is interest there. It hasn't been active lately, but I'm sure there is some interest.
We will keep working with them, and on every one of these steps we do, and we present that same argument all the time. So we will keep working on it.
Very good. Well, and that's all we had in terms of questions in the chat box. Doug, do you want to open it up in case anybody else wants to ask a question and unmute themselves?
Sure, I've got some comments, but perhaps I might open up. Even some of the panelists may have some questions for discussion. We have 5 minutes left.
I had a question about the pallet pilot. I think where the confusion was for me is, I know you said there's one placard on each pallet, but each individual case will still have a barcode on it?
Always.
Okay,
So what we're saying is there's 42 or whatever, 35, whatever the configuration in a pallet. Inside meat messaging, it says all these barcodes are this placard, and all
Okay.
these placards are this shipping container. So you can go from shipping container down to the pallets, and from the pallets down to the individual cases. So you can go from the top all the way to the 700 cases, or from any case all the way up to the shipping container. So
and that would also work with labs and product exams as well that need to be taken from the cases?
yes, so you can remove a case off a pallet, referencing the pallet placard ID, and go, this case was used for sampling, blah, blah, blah. So instead of 42, there's now 41. So
Okay,
yes, that process is there.
thank you.
Des, this is Kim Danella. Thanks for the presentation. I think you guys did a great job. Love meat messaging. We are getting involved in that now. If you are going to do a pilot, another pilot, we would love to be involved in that, because we would love to try one placard for the entire container. Because my concerns are the issues that we had trying to stretch wrap the loads on slip sheets. Slip sheets is the culprit here. If we can get away from that somehow, I don't know how we do it, but that would be the best way for us to get away from that slip sheet and get down to one placard.
So Kim, always good to hear from you. What you've just said is we have a 700 carton pallet. I think that's what we want, isn't it?
Yep.
The shipping container is the pallet, and it
Yes.
stays intact from arrival to processing in a facility, and we're treating it as a single entity unit all the way through. There's a challenge for Len and I to figure out how we can make that happen.
Oh, I have faith in both of you, so keep
Thank
going.
you.
Did see Steve in the chat box. There's some questions there. Is an FCG pallet created at a supplier for pallet program? And another query is are they slip sheeting the pallets or putting pallets in? I'm sure if we've covered those, but perhaps they might be the final questions, and I might wrap up from there.
Your thoughts, Len?
I know with the FCG palette, I think back in the olden days when Laurie Bryant was around, I think there were some discussions about this. And I don't know if it went any further than just some discussions. So maybe it's something to bring back up again, since the chemical lean can be for each box on the certificate or on the container. So maybe it's something we could talk about, Steve. And then the other thing, slip sheet, of course, for the pilot, we did slip sheet. I don't know if we did throw away pallets or not.
For Australia to China, we have to use a export wooden pallet on the frame. So that we're used to dealing with doing that, but everybody hates it because in our export establishments, we don't allow any physical wooden pallets. They're not permitted in the facilities under our food safety program. So they're all plastic pallets. So the slip sheeting is the most weight, time, size effective. However, the conversations that have taken place with Australian manufacturers in failing to ask their customer, the US, what size footprint cases should be, I can't understand for the life of me why they didn't bother to ask. So our biggest problem when we've been doing slip sheet pallets and Kim was sort of touching on bits of that as well. If our footprint for the pallet doesn't match the footprint required for US logistics, there's a big problem. So the biggest problem we've got in this conversation is our Australian manufacturers forgot to ask the customer, the US, what should be the footprint of a case. Because if we're all using the same case footprint in terms of the pallet footprint, so it's a standardized pallet footprint that fits a shipping container and fits US logistics, then the logistics challenges of moving slip-sheeted pallets rapidly diminish. While the configuration size don't fit, it's always going to be a problem.
Thanks, Des. And some great final comments. So, folks, I might just take a few seconds just to wrap up and can bring this webinar to the close. So, we hope we achieved our objectives for today, which is just providing all of you good folk the latest information on the MEAT messaging system. I'd like to thank all of you, all the attendees, for the hard work you do behind the scenes, bringing Australia's great product into the greatest red meat consuming region in the world. We greatly appreciate your efforts. Also like to thank Des and his team for his efforts in bringing this innovation to the market in the world of digital supply chain. So Des, thank you for that. Thank you, Len, for helping Des in market. You've been a great resource for me in my early time in my role here. Certainly thanks to each of our industry speakers today. So Nate, Tiffany, and Frank, thank you for taking the time to share your story. I know you've all got busy jobs. Thanks, Steve, for hosting. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and spending some time with you, and having access to the MICA network. So in summary, in terms of benefits to users of MEAT messaging, you can see some clear examples of how rejection notices have dramatically reduced, and that means less product wastage. And I think having been heavily involved in the production side of our industry and then seeing the effort that goes into producing product, if we can continue to minimise wastage in market, that's a great thing for everyone involved. I can see some clear benefits, reduction in administrative costs for each of the users of the MEAT messaging system, accepting that there is an onboarding time and energy requirement, but beyond that, should dramatically see reduction in administration and document handling. Sure, there's still a couple of issues to iron out, and we've had some good discussion around those today, but I strongly encourage everyone to be part of the solution to those issues, such that we all realise the benefits that we're all chasing. And so lastly, where to from here? So we certainly like to encourage further future uptake of this technology. With that in mind, if you'd like further information, by all means, reach out to Des or Len or myself in market. If you'd like further information on MEAT messaging, the website is meatmessaging.org. So you can log on there and check out information and contact the team. Des will also be in market at the upcoming MICA conference. So it's a bit of a plug for the upcoming MICA AGM conference, which is from October 24 to 27 in Chicago. And we're looking at hosting a workshop on MEAT messaging at the conference, which will be in a side room. So you'll see some further information be disseminated on that from MICA to register for those workshops. And that'll give you another opportunity to hear from Des and Lenny about how to use this service. So with that, thank you again for all of your time. Wish you the best for wherever you are the rest of your day, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night or evening.
Thank you.